Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode and another Friday night and another episode of Live Ghost Stories by the Fireside. We are 1 week away from the final of the season, and I'd like to take a moment to thank each and every one of you who have joined me this year and have supported and enjoyed these stories that I've been telling. I know I have enjoyed coming on here and telling these stories, and I hope that we'll get to do this again next year. It has indeed been a learning process, and as we get used to doing it, the stories will open up, the tales will probably be more broad, and I hope before it's over, by next year, I hope to be telling more of my stories and have more guests come on, maybe even some like with Aaron last week, having his own story to add. It's a good, fun time, and as much as I would love to have everyone around a campfire and telling these stories way into the night, and as traditions used to do when they would tell these stories and get one another so scared that see how things were going to go when they got home, because you get your mind full of ghost stories and creepy things that go bump in the night, and then you leave the fireside in the safety of numbers, and you're suddenly alone, and the branches of the leaves and the branches of the trees start looking like fierce, gnarled claws of something from beyond the veil of mortality, or someone start hearing the crack and pop of twigs moving off in the woods or nearby, and it starts to play on your mind as the stories were echoing. And some of the best ghost stories don't have elaborate chairs sliding across the room and things flipping and floating around. Many of the best ghost stories told, and even the ones experienced, come with a subtlety of things you're familiar with, but are out of place. It's like the pictures you sometimes see where a person's taking a selfie of themselves and there's a dog behind them, and then they realize, I don't have a dog. But yet, in the picture, there it is. That's out of place. And these things really touch on the fears of not just being alone, but being not entirely alone. It's knowing that you should be alone and then you're not. It's the invasion of the sanctity that keeps you of a sound mind, of knowing that everything's okay, it's just me. But then that sound, those footsteps, the door that opens itself, the light that cuts itself on, the dog that appears in the selfie, suddenly reminds you that maybe you're not quite as alone as you had thought. So it's always fun around this time of year to tell these stories, to tell more stories. And I really enjoy getting on, looking at you guys by the fireside and sharing these tales, whether you're watching them here with me live or whether we are watching them a day, a week, a month, even half a year later, and you're happening across them and you're watching them for the first time. I'm glad that you get to enjoy these. And it's an honor and a privilege for me to sit here to be able to tell these stories and share these tales with you by the fireside. I know I enjoy it. Poe enjoys it. And then, well, I'm sure if my Halloween tree here could talk or communicate, well, I'm pretty sure he would like it too. All right. Now, tonight's episode of Live Ghost Stories by the Fireside is brought to you by the EvansstoneTower.com. The Evanstone Tower is the home for all things W.R. Frady. There you'll find the Legends of Lacy Road. You'll find the World of Aerith and the Island of Igraine and Ballador. You'll find Darkhaven Manor, the home of the Vampire Killer. You will find the Evanstone Tower itself, which is the collective library of various tales. You will also find Whispery Hollow, an old town with restless spirits. But do feel free to enjoy your stay. Stay as long as you like. Also, Wolf Moon Studios, which is the gallery and art gallery and pursuit for W.R. Frady, which will have featured artists. We'll have they'll have featured artists, featured musicians, other authors that I may be working or collaborating with, as well as good, supportive people. So then don't forget to stop by and visit the Cantankerous Cauldron and see what's brewing in the world of W.R. Frady. Who knows what you might find that is in store for the future. I would also like to give a good shout to, besides the Evanstone Tower, again, like I said, the EvansstoneTower.com is the home for all things W.R. Frady. Will be coming soon, late 2021, early 2022. So be paying attention, stay tuned. It will be up in the air and running soon. I'd also like to give a shout out to the podcast, which I will be joining in on tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I have been invited to join in and participate in the Coach Mickey and Friends podcast to share some ghost stories and personal experiences. So I definitely look forward to getting going on and sharing some of these stories and being able to be a part of this. And I would like to thank them for reaching out and inviting me. So thank you very much for that. And if you're able to tune in with whether it's iHeartRadio or Pandora or anywhere you can listen to your podcasts. Again, the name of the podcast is Coach Mickey and Friends. I'll be joining them tomorrow. Again, would like to give a shout out to all my friends and family who've been there supporting me and standing by my side this entire time. Even the ones who a lot of times doesn't seem like they're there, but then they turn around and surprise you. So it's always good to have people who you know are always in your corner. I would like to give a shout out to my friends in the Devil's Daughter movie that's coming up next week. The movie The Devil's Daughter, which will be coming up next week at the Golden Ticket, and then hitting the internet on Halloween itself. The Devil's Daughter is a dark origin story for Harley Quinn, as it focuses on some pretty heavy issues, and in the meantime, all proceeds for the movie will be going to gracious hands to help combat domestic violence, to help get families who are victims of domestic violence up and out of the situations they're in and help them start their lives over. So it's a great, great charity. And then this movie that's coming out, I'm honored to be a part of it, and we'll be at the movie theater next week along with the cast for Q&As, meet and greets, and the main premiere. I'll also be I'd like to give a shout out to the Dusk series, written and directed by my good friend Ron Rosman. It's a great little series. You can find it on YouTube, or you can find it on Avail TV through Roku or Amazon, or even Apple TV Plus, or Apple Plus TV, however you say it. And even be sure to check that out. I will be beginning in season 4 to be a main character there. I can't talk too much about it except for to say that I will be in it. And it will begin shooting within the next month or so. I'd like to give a shout out to my good friends, Clint, Kevin. Had something to get my. Oh, wait a minute. All right, Kevin Carver, which is what I was going to try to say. But my good friend Kevin Carver, both of whom have been on here avidly throughout the seasons, watching. Clint was actually guest on on some of the Clint and his wife Bridget were actually guests on the show a couple of times last year. I would have loved to have gotten them in here to be guests on it this year, but I don't think our schedules just hadn't lined up. But then again, next week is the final week. Who knows? I'd like to give a shout out to my good friend Aaron Rogers, who was a guest on here last week. I'd like to give a shout out to my friends Moonrunner83, Chad Williamson, and Megan McDuffie, and just give a good shout out. And I'm not going to try and name everybody because I'll be all night, but to each and every one of you, I want to give a good shout out to each and every one of you and say thank you, all of you, named, unnamed. Thank you again. You guys have made this possible. And yes, I could come on and do this, but it's all of your support. You're coming on, watching, and let me know that you're interested in wanting to see these stories. That makes it worthwhile for me to come on and do this. It brings me more joy to know that you guys are out there enjoying what I'm doing and that you want to be more a part of it. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I am honored to be here doing this with you guys. Now, as you've probably seen, A couple of weeks ago, we talked about things that go bump in the night. I can't remember all the stories we told, but I do remember that we talked about how these are the things that, the reason why kids fear the dark, and why the strong, brave man during the daytime who might just be frustrated at his tire going flat or his engine stalling on a lonely country road might feel completely different if that same engine, that same road was in the dead of night and there's no cell phone service and lights are few and far between, and you're really not sure of how far the nearest house is and who or what you might encounter along the way, much less who or what you might encounter at the home. So, and then those childhood fears being rekindled. That feeling of laying out by yourself in the middle of the night, in the middle of a field, and hearing the footsteps and cracks of things moving around. So, let's begin tonight's ghost stories with a tale that comes back from when I was a wee little one. You see, we had moved into the old house on Lacy Road. At that time, it was not Lacy Road. It was just a rural route number. But the old house, little did we know when we moved in that house was going to impact so many of our lives. Some of them very positively. Some of them, well, is the reason we're sitting here talking tonight. You see, one of the first nights we were there. Now, we moved in when I was 2 years old. And one of the nights when we were there, everybody had gone to bed. Now, I want to explain something very significant here. We had a dog named Bigfoot, who was 3/4 white wolf. And beautiful, beautiful big dog. I used to kind of sit on him and ride him like a horse. But beautiful dog. However, he, like the wolf he was very protective of the family. In fact, even though he knew who my grandfather was, would not let him out of the house. Not let him out of the car when he came to the house until Pop or Mom walked out and said that it was okay. Well, now Bigfoot wouldn't do this with someone he knew. And this little detail plays a significant role in what I'm about to say. You see, on the first nights we were there, the doors were locked from the inside, meaning no one could come in, just open the door and walk in. And it was Mom and Pop in the room down by the door, by the entry door. So if somebody was to come in, they would be the first to hear it. James was in the room just across the fireplace from them, downstairs, which you'll hear stories about that room and events there and another time. Roy, Brigetta, and Crystal slept upstairs, and I always slept, and usually I slept with one of them somewhere for a while. Being 2 years old, there's no telling where I slept, or who it does. I just depend on who I wanted to crawl into bed and sleep with that night. So it was just the way it was. Our family's always been close, but that's not the point. The point was the lights had gone low. Everybody was that settled in for the night. It was quiet. Everything seemed normal. Well, Brigetta, Crystal, and everybody heard footsteps come up the steps. And the footsteps would walk around up the stairs, around the landing of the stairs, into the big open hallway, and it would go steadily to each door and pause as if looking in each of the doors. Now, granted, everybody didn't think anything of it because, well, they thought it was Mom or one of them coming up to check on everybody in a new house. But then downstairs, Mom and Pop would hear somebody come walking down the steps and walking through the house. Again, Mom and them wasn't thinking anything of it because they thought it was Crystal, Brigetta, Roy, or one of them coming down to go to the restroom. Well, come to find out, it was neither. Mom or Pop, neither one had been upstairs to check on anyone, nor had Crystal, Brigetta, Roy, or any of them, or myself, gotten out of bed and come down the steps to go to the restroom. Now, the part of this that makes it even more odd is, as I said, the doors were locked from the inside, and Bigfoot sat by the front door on the outside, and yet he made not a peep the entire night. So, to this day, that was the first encounter of the old house for the Frady family on Lacy Road. Another tale of a thing goes bump in the night during that same time. See, I always love to sleep outside during the summer, out in the field, out in the yard, to look at the stars and things. But as you can figure, all things have to begin somewhere, right? Well, there was definitely a beginning. You see, many, many years ago, back when I was young, we had just moved into that old house out on Lacy Road. As I said, at this time, it was still just a rural route. I don't even know. I think I can actually still remember the old address. That's pretty weird. But as it all began, the field out beside of the old house had what we would pretty much a small orchard-like area with crab apples and walnut trees and pecan trees, and you could tell that they had been planted that way distinctively because the way that they were in line, but it was slightly overgrown with briars, brambles, and other weeds. But out in that same deal, there was a little shack-looking shed that was out there. Nothing big. It was a very small shed. And actually, it fell after several years. One of the things I hated was those things had bees' nests in them that you brush against them and get stung. I hated that. But it all began when some of the family would come over. Crystal and Brigetta also liked to sleep outside under the stars. And on this particular night, we all slept out in the side of the yard near that field where the little shack was and the crabapple trees and stuff. We didn't camp out in that field because, as I said, that particular field was overrun with briars and brambles and cuckleburs and just about anything you could imagine not wanting to step on in the middle of the night. So, as we were laying there, as teens, and of course a 2 to 3 year old has a tendency to do, we all sat there talking into the night and stuff. Well, eventually they drifted off. And I loved being there. I mean, so I was enjoying the night, and as best as I can remember. But the next part is something I distinctively remember. See, the woods at that time were nothing like they are now. They were an older woods. They had been around. Some trees down there were probably several hundred to 1,000 years old. Huge hardwoods. And the area had a distinctive look to it that you could almost see a resemblance to what the old forest looked like if you were ever around the old house and went back in the woods behind the house between it and where everything was cut down, or if you went down along the power line and went to the older woods that was across the creek that had not been touched. But yeah, this was before they clear-cut the forest, the woodlands. But I remember it was in the dead of night, and only the ambient light of the sky. Now, there was no street lights in this area at this time, no street lamps. So it was dark. The only thing you had was the skylight and the moonlight, and just the ambient light from that. But I remember, as I was laying there, I remember hearing something down toward the gate where you go down to the woods, and looking up, and I remember I'm 2-3 years old, but I remember this is as clear as day, because it just sticks out. But I remember seeing something that looked like a fairy tale giant. As funny as this sounds, it looked like a fairy tale giant just trotting through the woods, with its head towering above the trees. And all I could think was, don't want it to see me, and laid down. I mean, and it, many times when I would be out there, I would be watching to see if I ever saw it again, and I never did. But I actually remember looking into the old fairy tale books at the drawings and seeing the ogres and giants of the illustrations, and remembering seeing something of that sort just walking through the woods down below like nothing was going on. But yeah, so that was another story from way back then. Of course, most people would probably mark it up to a child's imagination. Sometimes I do too, but then there's times I honestly wonder. Sometimes we see things that we don't know how to process. Anyway, so in keeping in track with the things that go bump in the night, I'm going to share a story from the Scary Stories. The story is called Footsteps. Now, you'll remember this one. It's from Scary Stories 3. And it's probably going to be adapted and changed some as I'm telling it from memory. But, Leslie was sitting doing her homework in the dining room area. of her home when she heard the front door open and shut, and footsteps come walking in and walked up the steps and then down the hallway and down to the rooms. And when she heard that, she realized they were a little too heavy to be her mom or dad's. So she went running up to see who might have went upstairs. Well, she went up and checked. Nobody was upstairs. The house was empty. So she went back downstairs and puzzled by the ordeal, sat back down to do her homework, wondering if maybe she had imagined the whole thing. But just as soon as she started her homework, she heard the footsteps again. And they come back down the hallway and come down the stairs, and then they turned and come through the living room and got right at the door, the dining room door, and the dining room doorknob started to turn and then started to creak open. And then she jumped up and said, "Leave, get out now!" Well, the doorknob stopped, pulled right back shut. She heard the footsteps go back through the living room, the front door open and close. And as she heard that, she jumped up and she ran outside to see who it was. Snow was falling. But there was no sign of anyone outside, nor were there any footprints in the new fallen snow. You see, the Twilight Zone always put it that sometimes if you just made the wrong turn or if you just did the wrong thing, that you would be in a place where the weird happened. Sometimes the weird just happens, but it comes in such normal means that it is not until we realize we're in the face of something darker or something beyond our understanding until the ordinary crosses the threshold of extraordinary. As I mentioned before, the candle that blows itself out in a room where there's no breeze. A door that just slowly opens itself. Footsteps when you think you're alone. The photo you take of yourself only to find there's an animal behind you and then realize, but I don't have a dog or I don't have a cat. But yet there it is in the picture. These are the things, the sounds you hear at night. Sometimes the sounds you hear at night are the things that unnerve you the most, especially when they're out of place. Aaron mentioned last week in his stories about playing with the bathtub stopper and the distinctive sound it made, and then when he was laying there in his bed hearing that stopper roll itself around the bathtub and it being right behind his head through the wall, and hearing that distinctive sound of that stopper rolling around in the bathtub, and knowing that whatever was doing it knew that if he was to call his mom, it would make it look like nothing was going on and that he was just imagining it. The true fear yes, Clint, you have a point. Like when you record a song and you hear it, when you play it back, you hear a voice that wasn't in the room. See, that is when the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and then you realize where I should be alone, I'm not quite as alone as I had thought. Very good point. And the thing about it is, it's the fact that if you try to explain it to someone, you're going to be feeling like there's 1,000 ways they think you should be committed, because people just don't believe in that thing anymore. But yet, here it is, it's happening. But you can't tell anybody about it. Oh man, you'll have to tell me about that. But the next story is the Legend of Lacy Road. We've already got 2 Legends of Lacy Road in here tonight. Let's bring in a third. You see, there was a night when... Actually, we're going to bring in 2 Legends of Lacy Road, since Clint's on here with me. And I'm going to start with that one, which was the night... Now, understand, I had dogs. My family and I had dogs. At the time of this, it was a little quartet of dogs who were as much a handful of fuzzballs as they were an alarm system, which was Baby, Trouble, Rascal, and Julius, a.k.a. Hog Dog. But Clint and I were outside. Now, again, we were sleeping out. Always had some wild stuff happen when we slept outside. From weird things we would see in the sky to the field dweller, as Clint and I come to call the thing that dwells in the field, to just a myriad of different events. This one, again, we were sleeping outside, and we were talking about things that were going on and weird stuff and ghosts and such, when we were near where the old shed used to be. And about that time, from the weeds just beyond where me and Clint were standing, a growl came from the weeds. Now remember, here's why I said it's out of place. We have dogs. The dogs weren't over there. And this growl was not a dog. To this day, Clint and I really do not know what that growl was or what emitted it. But we do know it was less than a few feet from us when it did. Clint was always the self-proclaimed skeptic, but even then, even that night, he had no explanation other than something growled in those weeds. But yeah, that was a pretty wicked experience. Now, the next Legend of Lacy Road was a night when, like last week, I told the story of when Nathan came to spend the night and the thing was messing with his foot. This happened another time. This event took place just before it. And this event took place just before the events of the story last week about something messing with Nathan's foot. You see, we were getting ready to go on a trout fishing trip with my dad. And we had to get up early the next day. But Nathan and I we stayed up for a while, playing Nintendo and renting the games, playing Nintendo, laughing and carrying on. Now, at this time, Nathan was still sleeping in the bed by the doorway. I was sleeping in the bed by the window because the events of that one story hadn't happened yet. Notice I did say yet. But we were laying there and we were talking. And the old house, I want, because of the events that I believe, that I have good reason to believe spurred the events of some of the phenomenon in that house, there were some really dark things that had gotten in there. And one of those dark things was waiting on me and Nathan to cut the light out that night. As me and Nathan were sitting there talking and things, now, beside the bed, now Clint will probably remember this, beside the bed I used to have this plaque that had 2 display swords. You couldn't use them for anything, but there were 2 display swords and a morning star hanging down. Or a flail is what the real weapon's name is called. But, and it was just specifically for display. But that night, it didn't get to be a display for long. As Nathan and I were sitting there, we kept hearing something. Well, I don't know if Nathan really heard it. He never really said anything about it. But I kept hearing something move around in the room. As Nathan and I were talking, I was looking at where I used to have the stereo sitting at the edge of my bed so that I could get up and hit the CD player. And I love to listen to music and stuff like that when I go to sleep. In fact, I still do. So that's something I hadn't changed. I still love to listen to music as I go to sleep just because it helps my mind relax and things. But as I was laying there and I was looking at the thing, I noticed there was something watching me from the edge of the bed, from the very end at the foot of the bed. And it stood approximately, probably 18 inches knee high. But I will never forget that it was these big, bulbous, yellow eyes just sitting there staring at me. And I was like, Nathan, do you see it? Do you see it? And he said, what? I'm like, right there at the edge of the bed. Do you see it? And he was looking and he couldn't see where it was. So I said, just keep talking to me. And so I slowly reached up, wrapped my hands around that display flail or morning star, and in a move fast as I could go, I whipped it around and brought it down with the ball come crashing down right where the 2 eyes were. Nathan had thought I'd lost my mind because of the sound of the ball hitting the ground. But whatever it was that was standing there was gone. In fact, I don't recall ever seeing it again. Except for I think I saw a picture once that had it in it, had the eyes in it again. But that picture was long ago destroyed. But yeah, I remember that thing came crashing down. Nathan was like, you didn't see it? It's like that thing was there was something at the edge of the bed staring up at me. And goes, Nathan's comment was, your dad's going to be coming up here staring at you in a minute. We making more racket like that. But yeah, that old house had some pretty wild stuff that went on during those times. And again, that was another one of those things that go bump in the night. And I made the bigger bump in the night with the crash of the Morningstar ball onto the floor. But yeah, that's tonight's stories. it's interesting when you go back to look at those stories and the things that's happened and led us to where we are today. There's still more stories in that house to share. And if you tune in tomorrow for the Coach Mickey and Friends podcast, you'll be hearing some more of the ghost stories. That there'll be more. I'll be sharing some more personal experience and ghost stories, much like the ones that inspired the Legends of Lacy Road that happened tonight. That you're hearing tonight. All right. Well, I thank everyone for joining me. I hope you enjoyed these little tales and stories. One more shout out I want to give. There's an album on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever YouTube and wherever you can find some of your music by Antler Hill Arts called Carolina Lore. Now, Carolina Lore is based around Carolina legends and ghost stories and tales. But on that album is a track called Race Against Darkness. Race Against Darkness is my tale. It's one of the Legends of Lacy Road, and I am narrating the story on that album. And it has got music backing it up to add to the drama and the mood. So if you get a chance, and then there's other ghost stories, there's other tales on there, as well as some some good and funny songs that tell stories. And all of them are linked to real locations, from the Devil's Tramping Ground to Polly's Island to Valdez, North Carolina, to even all the way up in Elk River. So, and I could tell you a story about Elk River, but that's another story for another time. All right. I would like to thank everybody again. The name of that album was Carolina Lore by Antler Hill Arts. I appreciate everyone joining me. Don't forget to keep an eye out for news on the EbbenStoneTower.com. Like I said, EbbenStoneTower.com is the home of all things W.R. Frady, and will be coming soon by late 2021, by early 2022. I look forward to getting this up. I look forward to sharing the Ebbenstone Tower with you guys, and for you to start exploring, getting to read some of the stories, see what I'm building, see what I'm doing, and really have a HQ for everything that is W.R. Frady related, and that's so I don't have to rely on blog spots and things. So I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. One more week before Halloween. Thinking about going and watching Halloween Kills this weekend. So maybe I'm hoping that'll be as good as the last one that I watched. So definitely looking forward to that. Everyone, y'all guys have a good evening. Have a wonderful week. And it's the countdown to Halloween. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you. And we'll see you again soon.